What's going on, everyone? Welcome back. Today we have got our Week 5 Fantasy Football Waiver Wire pickups, so make sure to tune in. If you enjoy, hit that like button, subscribe, give us a follow on Twitter at AllDayPigskin to continue interacting with us there, and let us hear it in the comment section. Do you agree, disagree, along with any other questions you guys might have? We will do our best to answer them all. But with that being said, let's get right into it. And as always, we kick it off at the quarterback position. And here, the name that we have to begin highlighting will be Trey Lance of the San Francisco 49ers, because Jimmy Garoppolo suffered a calf injury early in the Week 4 contest of the 49ers, which means it's going to be the Trey Lance show for at least a couple of weeks. And Lance has got some pretty nice upside. Now, he didn't exactly, light the world on fire in Week 4, but he still had 157 passing yards, 2 touchdowns, and he displayed that rushing upside as well. And the 49ers are going to be going up against the Arizona Cardinals in Week 5. That has the potential to be a high-scoring affair. So Lance, until Jimmy Garoppolo comes back, and maybe even for a longer period of time, if he impresses, could be a really nice dual threat option at the quarterback position. Moving on, we've got Matt Ryan of the Atlanta Falcons, not even listed here on the Fantasy Pros waiver wire rankings for Week 5, but I wanted to mention him regardless because he's actually coming off a pretty good week versus a good Washington defense. 283 yards, 4 touchdowns. And now he gets the New York Jets defense. I get it. The Atlanta offense hasn't exactly played up to its potential, but versus the New York Jets, that potential could very well be reached. I anticipate we could see some very big games from somebody like a Calvin Ridley, Kyle Pitts, obviously maybe even Cordero Patterson yet again, but I love the upside for Matt Ryan versus the Jets. He is a borderline QB1 on the week for me. And then finally, probably the biggest reach of them all, because I don't think he's going to be available in that many leagues, but if he somehow is, I do want to mention Sam Darnold. Now, Darnold, even though he's still making some mistakes, some bad turnovers, the fact that he's leading every single player in terms of rushing touchdowns, and, he's a quarterback, 5 rushing touchdowns on the year. Very, very impressive. 301 yards, 2 touchdowns, 2 interceptions versus the Cowboys, along with 2 rushing touchdowns. So if he's out there, he should have fantasy upside for the longest term compared to these other quarterbacks that we mentioned. So you can definitely prioritize him if available. But again, it probably will be a long shot. Let's look at our running backs now, though, because there are actually some really big names to know here after some injuries this week. Namely, this is going to be the headliner, Damian Williams of the Chicago Bears. Montgomery suffers a knee injury. Initially, it was believed to be an ACL. Now, doesn't seem to be as bad. But either way, this is going to be a multi-week absence. And we still don't know how long exactly it'll be. It could be 4 weeks. It could be longer. I doubt it's only going to be like a week or 2 week absence. That would be very surprising. And Williams was brought in as a guy that, Matt Nagy knows well. He's a dual threat running back. He's pretty much the only guy right now on that roster that, has as much experience as he does. And I understand the Bears aren't going to play the Detroit Lions every single week. So, it's tough to put that much value in whoever the main running back for the Bears is. But Williams will get the opportunities, and I would put a significant amount of fab on him. I think up until this point, you could argue he is the best potential waiver wire running back you can add at this point, again, depending on how long David Montgomery potentially misses. Moving on, we've got Samaje Perine of the Cincinnati Bengals. Similar situation. Joe Mixon, ankle week to week. Could be back this week, could be a little bit longer. And if that's the case, Perine is the next man up. Obviously, no more Giovanni Bernard, but we saw last season when Mixon was out that Bernard was a big-time player in this offense, and I think that'll continue to be the case with the backup in this case, Perine. He's a good pass catcher, and I think in PPR formats, he is in that low-end RB2 type of situation, plays the Green Bay Packers this week, And, the Packers defense, not exactly all too stout at this point in time. I think P. Ryan, even though a much shorter term, I think, solution at the running back position compared to a Damian Williams, he could very well have some success these next couple of weeks. And then finally, Michael Carter of the New York Jets. Again, I don't really want to bring him up, but because he is kind of a big name rookie, I will touch on him. The reason I'm not a big fan is because he's on the New York Jets offense. And yes, the Jets are coming off a win and probably what will be one of their few wins on the season, one of their higher scoring games on the year. But other than that, I think they're going to be playing from behind a lot, so the rushing attack won't be as big of a factor, as it probably was in week 4. But at the same time, Carter has kind of started to run away with the majority of carries on this offense. He had 13 rushes, 38 yards, and a touchdown. Again, you take away that touchdown, that's not a good stat line, but maybe more so from a perspective, you nab him, you maybe use him as trade bait, something like that. From that perspective, I think Michael Carter could be all right. And then last but not least here, Kenneth Gainwell of the Philadelphia Eagles. Miles Sanders is absolutely struggling for the Eagles. His usage has been atrocious. Gainwell, having success in terms of pass catching ability, which again, Sanders not really being utilized in that criteria. The Eagles do have a tough matchup versus the Carolina Panthers defense in week 5, but the way Sanders is trending right now, Gainwell could end up being the most valuable running back on the Eagles roster by the end of the year. Moving on now, though, let's get to our wide receivers. And this is a potentially big list because there's a lot of guys, potential dudes that are coming back from injury, things like that. So first I want to begin with Jamison Crowder of the New York Jets. And if you guys follow me on Twitter, you saw I put out, a tweet saying prior to Sunday games, watch out for Jamison Crowder. He could be a sneaky good play. Wouldn't you know it? Guy goes for 7 catches, 61 yards, and a touchdown. Really nice stat line in his first game back. And the Jets are going to be facing the Atlanta Falcons in week 5. Not the worst matchup, but I think as far as PPR options are concerned, Crowder, much, more experienced than an Elijah Mitchell, the rookie, kind of was getting hyped up at the beginning of the year. But to me, it's Crowder as the number 2 option on this offense. I think he's a solid option in PPR, like low-end wide receiver 2, high-end wide receiver 3. And then if you throw in the touchdown, that's where it gets potentially even that much better. But again, matchup not all that difficult, so I don't mind Jamison Crowder. Moving on, Randall Cobb of the Green Bay Packers had 5 receptions, 69 yards, and 2 touchdowns. And this one, again, is kind of as a result of Marquez Valdez-Scantling being placed on IR late last week. So who's going to be the number 2 wide receiver that kind of steps up after Devontae Adams? Looks like it'll be a Randall Cobb. Obviously has the chemistry with, Aaron Rodgers, knows the system well. He's trusted by Rodgers. I do think there's going to be inconsistencies here, definitely, because it's Devontae Adams as the number 1 guy, and then, everyone else much further down the pecking order. But at the end of the day, there is that connection. Packers have the Cincinnati Bengals in week 5, not, a terribly tough matchup. So Cobb is someone that maybe you can kick the tires on. Moving on, we've got Josh Reynolds of the Tennessee Titans. And this one is a little bit of, a dart throw, if you will, but the Titans are hurting at the wide receiver position. A.J. Brown, Julio Jones, and they get an awesome matchup versus the Jacksonville Jaguars in week 5. And Reynolds was a guy that led the Titans wide receivers in terms of targets this last week, had 6 catches, 59 yards, nothing too crazy, but Reynolds was actually the wide receiver 2 on this offense that I was most excited about prior to Julio Jones joining the squad. So I do think there is some upside here for Reynolds, but that's only until, Brown and Julio potentially come back. Moving on, A.J. Green of the Arizona Cardinals is the veteran wide receiver kind of experiencing that, now fantasy relevance yet again, playing with Kyler Murray and finally being able to stay healthy. Well, he's put together several fantasy relevant weeks in a row. And I think he's kind of a forgotten name, but he's going to be a hot name on waivers this week. 5 receptions, 67 yards, and a touchdown. And he's continuously just being involved. And I've said it before, Murray playing at an MVP level, there's going to be multiple, fantasy viable options on this roster. And it's seeming like AJ Green, doesn't have the exact same upside as, maybe a Christian Kirk, but probably going to be a little bit more reliable. So that's nice to see there. And then finally, I want to throw 2 names at you here. Still haven't played this season, but potentially could come back from IR this week. Rashad Bateman of the Baltimore Ravens, and then T.Y. Hilton of the Indianapolis Colts. I'm more so high on Rashad Bateman. I thought, heading into the season, he was one of my favorite rookie wide receivers. I was really high on him. He was my number 2 wide receiver behind Jamar Chase. And I think, honestly, he is the best wide receiver that the Baltimore Ravens have. And that'll be really nice, interesting to see how he's utilized. The Ravens passing the football more so this season. So if you can snag him now, that would be great. T.Y. Hilton, on an offense for the Indianapolis Colts, that's kind of up in the air. I think he'd be a decent veteran, kind of welcome back addition. So just a name to keep an eye out for there. But let's move on to the tight end position now. Not too many names. We've gotten to the point in time where it's, the tight end position, it's tough. It's kind of a wasteland. I'll throw out 2 names, but at this point in time, they're kind of all touchdown dependent. First and foremost, Max Williams of the Arizona Cardinals had a big week, 5 receptions, 66 yards, and a touchdown. Cardinals playing the San Francisco 49ers has the potential to be a high-scoring affair, as, kind of all these NFC West showdowns do. But I think you could do a lot worse at the tight end position, especially, again, considering that he's in a high-octane offense with a guy in Kyler Murray that's playing at an MVP level. And then finally, Dawson Knox of the Buffalo Bills. 5 catches, 37 yards, 2 touchdowns this last week. Again, probably falls in the criteria of, touchdown dependent, but on an offense with the Bills, high scoring upside, somebody to keep an eye out for. But now let's get to our defenses. And we kick it off with the Atlanta Falcons, who are going to be facing the New York Jets. And yes, I get it. The Jets just beat the Tennessee Titans. They put up 20 plus points on them. But I think that's kind of just a blip and not obviously what to expect every single week. I still think that Zach Wilson is, showing some struggles. And I think the Atlanta Falcons, all things considered, this might be one of their easiest matchups on the year. So I would take a chance on them. Next, we have got the New England Patriots versus the Houston Texans. Maybe some people dropped the Patriots defense considering they were going to be going up versus the Tampa Bay Bucks this week. Makes sense. But if they're available, they're going up versus the Houston Texans. If Davis Mills is still under center for them at quarterback, we saw this last week versus the Bills. They got blanked. Mills is not the answer at quarterback. The Texans look atrocious with him offensively. I love the Patriots in week 5 defensively. And then finally, the Las Vegas Raiders, who are going to be going up against the Chicago Bears in week 5. And yes, the Bears, had a good performance versus the Detroit Lions, but I said it last week. It's versus the Detroit Lions, folks. That defense is awful. And, the Bears still were almost in trouble late in that game. But the point being is this is probably going to be the best offensive performance that the Bears have. When they face the Lions, when they face these bottom-feeding teams in the NFL, the Raiders, they've played pretty good football. And I think they're going to be a much tougher test for the Bears, where they potentially make them play from behind. And then that's going to lead to a lot of mistakes, especially if it's rookie Justin Fields under center. So that is something to keep an eye out for. But with that, we wrap up our week 5 fantasy football waiver wire pickups. As always, let us hear in the comments section. Do you agree, disagree, along with any other questions you guys might have? If you enjoyed, hit that like button, subscribe, give us a follow on Twitter at alldaypigskin. And in the meantime, we'll see you guys in future videos.